right. Well, thank you guys so much for coming out tonight. I am super excited to be here to help you jumpstart your native gardens this spring. So I know we are all here because we want to help the earth from our own yard by growing native plants to support our insects and wildlife. They're drought tolerant. But I also know that it can be kind of intimidating when we look at our properties and we see all the things that we want to tackle to make it into this pollinator and bird haven that we can dream of, but it's hard sometimes just to get started. So that's my goal tonight, is to give you that little nudge, help you break down some steps that we can do over the coming weeks this spring and to take advantage of this time to get some more native plants into our yard. So this presentation really is directed to native plant newbies like I was just a few years ago that are just now starting to add natives to their yards, but I know there's a lot of seasoned native plant gardeners in the room here, so I'm hoping you can still take away a couple pieces of some tips or just some motivation to find another little corner of your yard that could use a few more native plants, because I do know that there's always room for just a few more, even if you think you've maxed it out. So tonight, what I want to cover is just a few things here. I wanted to show you my own yard and kind of the things I've been experimenting with the last few years as I started growing native, so use that as a case study. And then we'll talk about where we should all begin in our own yards this spring, talk about prepping and planting, and getting to work after this discussion in our own yards. Just briefly, a little bit of background on me. As I said, I am really a native plant newbie. I have always enjoyed gardening with flowers, and in particular flower gardening, but for years and years I just bought things based on how they looked, not on what benefits they offered. And that all changed when I went through the Texas Master Naturalist program in 2019 and 2020. Learned about all things Texas ecology related, but what really got me excited was the idea of the role of our native plants in supporting our ecosystems. And I knew that I wanted to continue doing what I've always loved with gardening, but do it with a purpose this time and really think about what I was putting into my yard and the effect it was having in my neighborhood. Okay, sorry, I didn't need to go forward there. Well, I'll keep on this. There's a couple other things about my background. I've been a professional blogger and online content marketer for the past decade. I have a background in marketing. I started my first website in 2011. It's a DIY home decor and crafting website called Design Improvise. And in 2020, I decided to apply my blogging skills to create a website on gardening with native plants. I saw there was a need for people that are new to native plant gardening, for simple, easy to understand information. So I started nativebackyards.com, and it's focused on growing native plants in general, but primarily on Texas natives as well. So check that website out if you haven't. And I wanted to share two gardens with you, in case you're not familiar with them. There are two gardens where I volunteer along with Alamo Master Naturalists and others from the Native Plant Society through Antonio chapter, where I'm also on the board now. I'm currently on the board of the Alamo Master Naturalists and the Native Plant Society, and you will often see me at this garden, which is our demonstration garden. It's located in Phil Hardberger Park, and there are two sections to Phil Hardberger Park. This garden is located off of the military highway entrance, and you'll find it behind the Urban Ecology Center. So definitely try to go check it out this spring. Right around May is when it's going to come alive with Texas wildflowers, and you'll see there's a tall gate, a fence around it. But that is not to keep people out, that's to keep the deer out. Deer can come in at any time, even though the gate is closed. Just open it up and come on in. And you will find, I think, over 100 different Texas native species there, each with their own little sign that explains the name, the scientific name, the bloom period, the wildlife it supports. So it's just a great way to learn about different native plants, but also see them in an environment that's pretty harsh, because this garden gets full direct sun all summer long, and it does not receive any supplemental water. We do not have a water source out there. So it is pretty amazing to see what made it through this past summer. Obviously, in the heat of August, it wasn't looking its best, but those plants are super resilient. They're all coming back this spring, and you can really get an appreciation for some of the drought-tolerant plants that we have here in Texas. Has anyone been to this garden? This beautiful people? Yeah, it changes throughout the year, so it's fun to go through different seasons. We maintain it once a month. We have a group of volunteers that go out there and weed and prune as needed, but really it's pretty self-sufficient, and it is always full of butterflies and birds. This is another one where I volunteer pretty regularly, and I think it's a hidden gem in San Antonio. I don't think too many people are aware of it, but it's called the Circle of Springs Garden, and it's located at the Headwaters Sanctuary. So the Headwaters is adjacent to the University of Incarnate Word, right in the center of San Antonio. It is a 53-acre nature preserve, and in addition to having a number of walking trails, they have this beautiful garden right in the middle of it that features over 50 native Texas plants, and it also is in full sun, but it does receive some drip irrigation, so these plants are looking lush and beautiful in the middle of summer, and it's also maintained really beautifully by volunteers each week, so that is totally worth checking out. And I would just say, if you want to see this one, go before the end of the month, because they're going to be putting some fencing around it here shortly, as they're installing a native prairie around the perimeter of it, and they don't want people trampling over the grass buds. So this is off of Highway 281, adjacent to the University of Incarnate Word, central San Antonio. And if you just go to the Headwaters Sanctuary website, you can get information about visiting. You do need to get a parking pass because it is located on or next to the property of the university, but it's free to go anytime you want. Okay. So what really got me hooked on growing natives was the kind of immediate gratification that they offer in terms of bringing your yard to life. And I think nothing really demonstrates that more than frog food here. Let me see, I have a video. I don't know if I'll be able to play it. Is there anything on the screen there that says, like, push video? Oh, shucks. It'll be a bummer if I can't play my video for you all. Oh no. Is there any way you can go back on your end, Bill? On the bottom of the, is there anything that's maybe not? Well, we'll have to imagine this being covered with little butterflies. I took this, oh, there it is. Okay, cool. So I took this video, and I just could not believe how many tiny little butterflies, moths, bees, flies, the whole thing was just covered with little pollinators, and you see that a lot with frog fruit on a sunny day. So I love this ground cover, and it's just an example. If you plant this in your yard where it wasn't previously, you've created an instant habitat and nectar source for these pollinators, and it grows quickly, it spreads. So it's a great one for a sunny area. Okay, let's try the next slide. Here's another of my favorite plants, and there's a video on this too. I don't know. Can play that. This is another example of just, if you plant it, it will come. This is Grace Miss Flower in the demonstration garden that I showed you, and I promise you, if you put this in your yard this spring, by late summer, early fall, it'll be covered in queen butterflies that love to nectar on it, as well as monarchs, a variety of different butterfly species, and other pollinators. So if someone needs convincing about natives, I always tell them to put some Grace Miss Flower in their yard. All right. And then, of course, once you start attracting all of these insects to your yard, the birds will follow. As you probably know, birds require a crazy amount of insects, especially to feed their young. There's a Doug Halloran study that showed that a chickadee required somewhere between 6,000 to 9,000 caterpillars just to feed one group of their baby birds, one group of nestlings. And I have these little Carolina wrens at my house that for the past few years have always found a place to make a nest on my patio. And I got to watch firsthand just how hard they work to feed their little babies. There's a hungry little baby. They worked all day long bringing them little caterpillars and things, and it made me happy to know that they were finding them in my garden or nearby, that they had enough food to feed their babies. And I was able to actually see the 5 baby birds fled the nest. It was amazing. So to me, that tells me that I'm doing the right thing in terms of adding some of these plants and building a habitat in my yard. And these are just some other pictures I've taken of little creatures that I've started to pay more attention to, and I'm not very good at photographing things that move, butterflies and birds, and I'm kind of get better at that, but I have a whole lot coming through my yard each day. It's just a lot of fun to see. Okay, so now we will talk about my yard. This is what it looks like. This is my backyard about 5 years ago, and we moved to our home about 10 years now. For the first 5 years, I didn't really think much of our landscaping. That was the plants that were there from the existing owners. I couldn't even tell you what plants were in the landscaping other than our beautiful live oak trees. And then I started getting curious. Excuse me. My water. Okay. Then I started getting curious a few years ago. And oh my goodness. What I discovered I had in my landscaping bed was a forest of Nandina. Nandina forest is what I was growing in my backyard. And so, well, once I learned about Nandina, its surface level, it's a beautiful evergreen with pretty red berries on it in the winter. I realized that it's also a known invasive here in Texas. It can spread when birds eat the berries and deposit it elsewhere. It also is a pretty aggressive spreader through its rhizomes as it was taking over this bed here. And I had it surrounding my bird bath, and I thought, I think I can do a better job than just having Andina in my landscaping. So that's where I decided to start a few years back and becoming a native plant gardener. So what I did is I worked with a landscaper to get that Nandina out. It's really not easy to do. It's a lot of digging and then spending the next year really making sure that I got any root fragments out of the ground, because any little bit of Nandina will resprout. But I think I finally conquered the Nandina. And in its place, I started experimenting with a variety of mostly native plants, transplants that I was able to kind of collect from different places from the nursery and things. And this is what it looked like last fall. And in addition to the main bed around the fountain there, you'll see it kind of curves around for the back. And that was a project I took on the next summer. We had this strip of grass here that was always really hard to keep green in the heat of summer. It got a lot of sun, used up a lot of water. And so I took advantage of the program we have in San Antonio through our San Antonio water system. They will give you a rebate if you take out at least 200 square feet of your lawn and turn off the sprinkler systems in that area. And I was able to get some money for native plants to put there. So I was able to double the size of my garden. And I'm excited to see it all fill in. Everything's still quite new, but these are some pictures of some of the beautiful blooms I was able to experience last year, even with our drought. We had a lot of color, especially in the fall, in my garden. And then, of course, as I'm sure many of you know, once you get started, you can't stop. And so I expanded to the back side of our backyard fence to kind of a grassy, weedy area. And I decided to convert it into a wildflower bed. So I cleared the ground a couple of falls ago, and I sowed a bunch of wildflower seeds and some zinnia seeds, which aren't native, but I still really like for the pollinators. And it's been really fun to see what will do well back there. This past summer, it was just so darn dry. I didn't get a lot of blooms. The deer ate a lot of what was blooming and what wasn't growing well, but the goldenrod did great in the fall. There was a beautiful field of goldenrod back there. And in this spring, I see a lot coming up already. I'm super excited. I've got bluebonnets, and I used several mixes from Native American seed, Texas wildflower mixes, so I'm hopeful for a beautiful wildflower bed this spring. And I'll talk a little bit more about this later. But I started to kind of add up all the different plants that I've added to my yard since I started a few years ago, and I realized I had accumulated quite the list, and I think it's actually more than this now. I haven't updated this in a while, but it just makes me feel good to know that none of these species were there previously, and I've really increased the amount of plant diversity in my yard, and therefore the types of insects that are finding a habitat in my yard, and it's just been fun to see these different species grow and to kind of learn what will grow well in my yard and what won't. Okay, so now we're going to transition into a little bit of a native garden roadmap. So this is something I created to help others just getting started, kind of plan out how they would go about creating a native bed in their yard, or essentially adding native to an existing bed. So I kind of thought ahead a few weeks, and I'm going to talk about each of these steps. So the first one is picking a focus area, prepping the area, and then ultimately planning it out and planting natives in hopes that by the next month or a month and a half, if you don't have a garden bed, that you'll have one, or if you can think of an area where you want to add a garden bed, I want to help you do that. So I do have some templates that are available to you if you want them. I have a QR code here that you can scan with your phone, and then I'll have it at the end of the presentation as well. But if you don't do QR codes, you can always email me, and I'm happy to send you these templates if you want to use them. Okay, so in terms of picking a place, I would recommend, in terms of a priority area for this spring, is to pick a visible place, some place that you see often, for a couple of reasons. One is that I think you'll be able to appreciate it more. You're going to see the flowers and the plants as they're growing and notice the changes if it's a more visible space. Like this area, my kitchen windows look directly out onto it, so that's why I really wanted to make changes there first. So not only will you appreciate it more, hopefully you'll want to maintain it more, rather than if it was in a corner, a side yard, or something in your house that you don't see very often, kind of out of sight, out of mind. So I recommend starting with a visible spot in your yard. I also recommend starting small. So this is a picture of a woman in San Antonio that wanted to add some natives to her yard, and right along the front foundation, she kind of made an impromptu bed by putting some stones there as a border, and filled it in with a few shade-tolerant natives and some mulch. And that was a very doable project that didn't take a lot of time. Some other ideas from some other friends of mine in San Antonio: you could always plant at the base of a tree, like your church cap. You can use that area between your sidewalk and your and the street. If you have that strip of grass there, you could make you could plant there with some drought-tolerant plants like boxwood daisy or mealy blue sage. And lastly, you can always start with a pot. So as I mentioned before, I've always enjoyed container gardening, and I'm experimenting with adding different natives to pots to see what will do well, along with some of my non-native ornamentals. And I've got a little video here, if you don't mind playing that, just to show you one of the pots that I had this summer. But I have listed some smaller natives that I know can do well in pots. This year I had foxroot. It's a tree you want to break over the side of a pot because it does kind of trail. And you can just keep it trimmed if it gets too long. The pintos aren't native, but I added some inland ceos. As that would grow higher, it would add some height, and the seed heads would really look pretty in the fall. So I say experiment with that if you have containers at home. Add some natives in, and that's an easy way to get started if you don't want to start with a garden bed. Okay, so my homework for you is this week I want you to pick one area in your yard to use some more native plants. And I want you to do three things. I want you to measure it, gauge the amount of sunlight it receives, and then if there are existing plants in the area, determine whether they should stay, hopefully, or go. And we'll talk about each of these. So why measure it? Well, I'm sure as many of you have seen firsthand, natives can get big. They're happy growing in our climate and in our soils, and if they're happy in your yard, they can grow quite large. So it's important to know the mature size of your plants before you add them to your bed, and plan accordingly, and know that it's going to take a few years for them to get to that size. So don't space them out just based on what size they are in the pot you bring home from the nursery. You might have to dig them up and move them in a year or two once you realize just how big they're going to get. So I encourage you to try to space them out to make some smart decisions from the beginning. And then I think really sunlight is a big factor in plant success. So really knowing whether or not what type of sun you're getting in that area is helpful. And I have this little tracker that I made that you can use a piece of paper or your phone and just spend a sunny weekend day looking at the area that you're thinking about turning into a bed and just mark what hours is receiving direct sunlight, and then you can kind of add it up and determine, well, if it's less than 4 hours of direct sun, it's really a shade area. Heart shade is 4 to 6, and if it's getting more than 6 hours, you're going to want full sun native plants in that area. And then, if you're like where I was when I first started and you don't really know what you have growing, it's really interesting to start learning about what you have in your yard. And I like to use the iNaturalist app as a starting point to identify plants. And free app, I'm sure a lot of you already use it. There's also Facebook groups that are plant identification groups that you can post a picture to, where they can help you ID your plant. So the main goal is, I think, knowing what you have is the first step toward making your yard better. So I know what it is, and if it's invasive, if it is a non-native, it doesn't necessarily mean it's something you want to take out just because it's not native to our area. But if there are some problematic plants, you might consider removing them. And this is a list of a handful of invasives here in Texas. This is from the state website. So in my yard, in addition to the Nandina, we had a privet tree and a Chinese pistache and what else? I think that's all on the list. But if you do have these, know you're not alone. A lot of us have this stuff in our yard, but I think even if the only thing you do this spring is to take out an invasive, that's also considered a success, I think. So just consider that as a goal to help prevent their spread. And then I was going to use this little spot as my latest project that I've worked on, a small area that I've converted into another native plant bed. So last summer we had our fence replaced, and previously there was star jasmine growing up it and Asiatic jasmine ground cover on the base there, and I decided I wanted to get rid of all of that. So that was my focal area that I really focused on. Digging. Bag, and then I put cardboard. I'll walk you through it. But so far, it has not come back. So it's been almost a year. No, I didn't. No, I didn't. So we will talk about prepping the area. So you pick out your focal area that you want to start with, and then you can spend the next couple of weeks getting that area ready before you plant. So removing vegetation, creating a weed barrier. And if there's not a border around the area that you want to turn into a bed, I think having a border really makes it look intentional and can help your neighbors appreciate it too. So this is an example again from the back side of my fence where I started to sow wildflower seeds. This is what it looked like before. And I cleared the ground just using a shovel and a lot of arm strength and a rake, and tried to get as much of the soil exposed as I could, because I know, especially when it comes to sowing wildflower seeds, you really want good seed to soil contact. And of course, I didn't get everything out. There's been weeds that have come back then, so I try to stay on top of them and have done a pretty good job of doing so. But you'll see the rock border that I created. Those rocks were all on the ground. There was an instant border that I got for that. So yeah, that was a lot of fun. My daughter helped me create that. I would just say that spring is not the best time to sow wildflower seeds, though really the fall is. So if this is the project you want to do, you could spend the spring polarizing the area with clear plastic weighted down so the sun can really bake that over the summer. Or something I'm going to show you next is to use cardboard and mulch. You could put that in the area all summer long, and by fall, when you remove that, you should have ground ready to sow wildflower seeds. So for this area of our yard where I removed that grass, we had St. Augustine grass. And what we decided to do to remove it easily was to use a rototiller. I know in general you're not supposed to till your soil, especially not very often, but kind of trying to weigh the different options. That was the quickest way to break up the grass roots, and we just kind of raked them up. And you can see here there was a little bit of grass remaining, but I haven't had any come back because I put the weed barrier on top. So I don't know if anyone has suggestions for other ways to remove it. That works pretty well, and avoiding him using any type of herbicide. Thankfully, we don't have Bermuda grass. I'll talk about that later. Bermuda grass is the worst. So this is the area along the fence with all the jasmine, and this is what it looked like. And I started kind of ripping it up, and I realized underneath it was just a ton of river rock. I was like, oh man, this is. I've been there for a while, so I did spend a lot of Saturday afternoons digging up rocks and moving them to a different part of my yard. So there is step involved. As far as the weed barrier, I've really had a lot of success with cardboard and mulch. I just really love this as an alternative to any type of landscape fabric. I've seen weeds and Bermuda grass go right up through landscape fabric, and it's just a mess to work with. I've seen black plastic put down, and that's also I do not care for, but I really do like the cardboard method because it will break down slowly over time, and I've had a lot of success with it. And you can also, like I said before, put it directly over your grass and weeds if you don't want to spend a lot of time clearing vegetation, and you can just let it sit there for a number of months. It should kill what's underneath there. And so if this is a method you want to try, if they start collecting your cardboard now, so you can do this in a new bed, you can also do it around existing plantings, and I'll show you some examples. This is another fun example. This is my daughter's elementary school. This was what the garden beds looked like after COVID, unfortunately. We had 13 raised beds there, and they had been neglected for a while, and the Bermuda took over, and giant sunflowers. And I have to give credit to a very ambitious mom, not me, but another mom, decided to tackle those beds and remove all the weeds and grass and put in fresh soil. And then she asked me to help her put native pollinator plants in the beds. So we were super excited to revive the garden beds and put the plants in. This was last September. And here's the video here if you don't like to see this, but pretty much about a week or so, a little video. So after a week or so of putting in the plants, we started seeing weeds coming up already, especially the Bermuda was already creeping into the beds. And I just knew that it would not take long before those beds become overrun again by the Bermuda grass. So we decided to do the cardboard method. And we had cardboard that was donated by the school and by our local HEB, and we just ripped it up into smaller pieces and really covered those beds and situated it around the existing plants, and then put a few inches of cardboard mulch on top. So that was not this past fall, but the fall before, and we have not had to replace the mulch or the cardboard, and it's kept the weeds out. So that's like a year and a half. Not especially with something like that where it's volunteers that are trying to maintain the garden. We're not there very often. I think that's one of the quickest ways for some of these school projects to go south is when they're not maintained regularly. And this is a way to keep the garden looking great and mostly keep the Bermuda at bay. So just a couple of tips on this method. If you haven't tried it before, try to remove any type of tape from the boxes and the staples. Don't use the glossy or printed cardboard, just the natural brown cardboard is best. And make sure you overlap it so there's not any gaps that the basher weeds can get in through. And then you want to add 3 to 4 inches of mulch and water it down well. Yeah. No, there's not a drip system. We have a hose there, so we have the water. Well, so I water it in well when you first put it down just to kind of hold it in place. But when we water the plants, the cardboard doesn't go right up to the plant. We put enough area around the plant where we're just watering at the base of the plant. Yeah. As far as mulch goes, I really prefer the double shredded wood mulch. So preferably mulch that's from our native Texas trees that doesn't have any type of dye or coloring. And I've seen single dyeing, but I think it just doesn't break down near as fast and it's harder to work with. But I prefer the double shredded mulch. And I also like something called wooden mulch, which I've used on my garden beds, which is the mix of the shredded mulch and some compost. So that's a way to add some organic material to your garden. And you can always try leaf mulch. I've been trying leaf mulch in my garden bed with our live oak leaves. I'm unsure of them because they move around a lot, they blow around a lot, they don't break down very easily. So I've kind of been using them in my compost instead and putting them in a pile even behind my wildflower bed where they can slowly break down. But obviously that is a nice natural mulch if you don't have mulch. So this is the area in the backyard where I put the plants in, and then after the fact, I put in cardboard around them and mulch. You can kind of see some cardboard peeking out there because I didn't have enough mulch on there yet. But that has really kept I've had no grass come back and very few weeds come up in the year and a half since I've done that. So I'm pretty happy. And then I used the same method over on the fence garden. Once I got all those river rocks out, I found the cardboard and mulch. And I really, maybe just within a month after doing that, I cut a hole in the cardboard with like a garden knife and cut my plants in. So that's one way you can do it. You don't have to wait terribly long. And in terms of Bermuda grass, I just wanted to mention that because if there's one thing I spend most of my time doing when I'm at the Alma Master Naturalization Garden or the Circle of Springs Garden, it's trying to maintain this stuff and keep it up at the garden bed. It is relentless. And this is a picture from the Master Naturalist Garden where we tried using some black plastic under mulch, but the runners just go right under that until they find an opening. That doesn't stop them one bit. So I really don't like using black plastic because it kind of breaks down and becomes a mess. I would try the cardboard and mulch method, and I would really try to pull up as many of those rhizomes as you can. And if you don't have it in your bed already, using a really deep landscape edging, I think they say you need to go down like 8 inches so that the rhizomes don't go underneath it, can help prevent it. If you have an area that you want to convert to bed, try solarizing it during the summer. And as your last resort, try using herbicide. But Bermuda is really not fun. Not fun. And now for the fun part. Once you pick your focal area, you prep your bed, then you can choose your natives to go in there. And I just recommended sticking with a small selection of plants. It's tempting to have a potpourri of things, but I think it really looks nice if you can narrow it down to a handful, and if you have a larger area, you can repeat them in groups of 3. So that's visually appealing, and it doesn't hurt to sketch it out ahead of time and start marking down some of these native plant sales coming up. I know our chapter will be this coming weekend. They have a native plant sale at the SAWS, the San Antonio Water System Spring Bloom event. It's held at their headquarters on Saturday. So if you're itching to get some native plants soon, that's one option. And I believe that this chapter has a plant sale in April 22nd. So lots of opportunities to get some plants. As part of my resources, I had listed just a handful of native plants that I think are pretty easy to find at the nursery. Some for sun and another few that have for shade. There's obviously a ton of native plants. I have a lot more listed on my website, but those are just some introductory ones, I would say. But in general, what I try to think of when I think about plants for my garden are, does it serve as a butterfly or a moss host plant? You want to add as many host plants as you can. does it offer other wildlife benefits like nectar for pollinators, fruit, food for wildlife? And the reality is sometimes you have to narrow your list to what's available. So sometimes it can be helpful to go to your local nursery, see what they have, and build your garden around that versus having a wish list and then find out they only have a handful of things that you ideally wanted for your garden. But more than anything, find new plants, try to expand to some new species to increase that plant diversity in your yard. So in this area, after I kind of monitored the sunlight, I realized that it was really a part shade area. And so I showed some plants that I thought would do well there. Elencio, pigeonberry, chili cocoon, columbine, aster, and purple cobalt were some of the things in my initial plan that I had. And I kind of listed them out by bloom period if you want to get a good variety throughout the year. So there's always something kind of in bloom. Whether or not they are host plants, and any other benefits they offer for wildlife. And then I do have a little graph paper if you want to play around with a garden plan. Each square kind of represents 1 square foot, and if you know the mature sizes of your plants, you can kind of gauge how many you can fit in that area. And so I sketched this out, and then of course I didn't follow it exactly because when I went to get plants, they didn't have everything that I wanted, and I kind of improvised on that. Sometimes you go at least start with a plan, and even if you don't stick with it. And then this is what it looks like now. There's obviously everything's really so new, and I'm excited to see it really fill in the spring and summer, but it's definitely a lot better than the jasmine that was there previously. And then for the rest of the year, you want to keep that garden looking great that you put all that time into. So I recommend deep but infrequent watering, especially initially when they're in the ground for the first several months so the roots become established. You can stay on top of weeding, that just makes it easier on you down the road. Hopefully if you do the cardboard and mulch, you won't have to do too much weeding. And then certain of our native perennials can benefit from a midsummer cutback as well as this time of year when we're pruning them down for the new growth. So just one of my favorite tools. I don't know if anyone has this in their bag, but I absolutely love the Hori Hori knife. It's the one I use most often. This one is made by a company called Root Slayer, but it's great for digging up weeds. I absolutely use that a ton. As far as midsummer pruning certain plants like Turk's cap, and since I'm thinking about you like this, it can actually be cut back almost up to a half midsummer, and it'll give you a whole new round of blooms. I like to go to wildflowers.org. They have some great tips on when to prune things, as well as the Native Plant Society in Texas are list of plants by ecoregion. The spreadsheets that they have do offer some maintenance tips as well. So I like to use those resources. And then late winter, so late February, early March is when we cut back a lot of our woody perennials like the Flamicanthus here. And up to how much you cut them back, but I know they can take a pretty severe cut back anywhere from a half to, I don't know, I cut mine back to a few inches above the ground, but you can do 6 to 12 inches above the ground, and that'll just help encourage new growth and keep the plant size in check if you don't want it to get super big. All right, so that is my roadmap. I hope that's helpful and maybe has given you some ideas of an area in your yard you want to work on in the coming weeks. You're welcome to scan that to get the different materials, the templates, or you can email me. And I think that's it. Let's see. I have self-published a book like last summer. I published Native Plant Gardening for Beginners because I realized there just wasn't anything out there that was an introductory book for people that are just learning about native plants and why they're important and why they should be using them in their yard. So I do have a couple copies left here if you're interested in that. And you can also get it on Amazon. If you're a Kindle reader, you can get it on the Kindle. And then I do have some signs to sell. I have an Etsy shop. I sell native plant signs, shirts, stickers, hats, all sorts of native plant merch for native plant lovers. So that's it. Thank you guys so much.